Happy Friday, every pony. Let's get this University Days done. Chapter 20, Chapter 21. They're a little bit shorter than the last two chapters we just read, so maybe we'll get under an hour. But let's get right into it, finish it up. Morning in the Bonbon household was almost militaristic in its organization. Octavia watched through half-lidded eyes as the shop owner rushed about preparing for the day. Lyra was ushered to the kitchen counter for breakfast, then shoved into one of the bathrooms as soon as she finished. Octavia wondered what role the reformed unicorn played in the operation of Bonbon's shop. Surely she wasn't in charge of serving customers. Lyra had made great progress as far as Octavia could see, but that might be a little too much for now. Vinyl was snoring on the couch beside this one, still completely oblivious to the world and would likely remain that way for another couple of hours. Octavia felt the itch to get up and move to the other couch so they could be closer, but decided against it in review of present company. Even though they were all friends now, Octavia didn't quite want to push the boundaries yet, and snuggling in plain view of their hosts was a surefire way of doing that. Eventually, the rush died down and both Bonbon and Lyra trotted downstairs, already discussing the day's agenda. Apparently, there was a basement below the ground floor where Bonbon mixed up and cooked all of her confectionery delights, and she was eager to start another batch. Left alone in the living room, Octavia finally sat up and opened her eyes properly. Everything had a nice, homely feel to it. She could see that every little decoration had been lovingly chosen with no thought as to whether it was in or not. Bonbon just chose those things that she thought looked nice. And that was far more meaningful to Octavia than all the feng shui in the world. It had been a long time since she had thought about fashion or style seriously. Being away from her mother made her realize how little those things mattered to her. Appearance could only hide so much. Sooner or later, the heart had to shine through. And in this place, the heart was blinding. She found herself in a very happy mood as she slid off the couch and stretched her hooves. This place shared many qualities with her dorm room that she hadn't noticed last night. Lyra and Bonbon's companionship gave the whole building warmth in the same way that Vinyl's presence did. She felt safe here, at ease. There was no need to worry or any cause for alarm, just the simple pleasure of a nice winter morning. Octavia dug a hoof into her mane, only to find she had forgotten to bring her phone. She shrugged and trotted into the kitchen. No matter, it's not like I use it often. Bonbon had left some pancake mix ready to go on the counter, which surprised her. That mare's thoughtfulness knew no bounds. She quickly found a frying pan and began cooking. The back of her mind wondered how much walking she would need to do to burn off such an unhealthy meal, while the front of her mind politely told her to be quiet so she could enjoy the darn thing. Imagine an earth pony cooking pancakes, the skill required to flip a pancake in your mouth. Vinyl showed no signs of waking up, so once the pancakes were done, Octavia cleaned up and devoured her creation with the ferocity that privacy affords. She only barely contained a satisfied sigh at the cost of her belly gurgling in agreement. With breakfast over with, she returned to the couches, this time approaching Vinyl's pale form. After a quick glance around to look for observers that was fueled by habit rather than logic, she planted a syrupy kiss on her DJ's half-open lips. Smiling softly, she made for the bathroom to freshen up. A perfect start to what was clearly going to be a perfect day. Vinyl's eyes cracked open at the sound of the bathroom door closing. Why do my lips taste so sweet? She mused groggily, wincing at the growing sunlight shining through the window overlooking the front of the shop. She instinctually looked around for Octavia, and upon finding her missing, she groaned and let her head flop back down. Waking up next to Octavia was the only reason she tolerated mornings at all. Take that experience away, and all that was left was sore eyes and dead muscles. Slowly, the faint sound of falling water made itself apparent. Vinyl turned her sluggish gaze towards the source. The thought of Octavia in the shower woke her up quickly, sending familiar little tingles down her spine. She was of the mind to charge in there and interrupt her lover with the smell of pancakes drifted over from the kitchen. Her stomach gurgled and immediately overruled the more cheeky parts of her body, and she stumbled over to investigate. A plate, stacked with pancakes, had been set out for her like a gift from heaven. She didn't hesitate, before diving straight in, stuffing as much as she could into her mouth. They were never really able to cook anything great in the dorm kitchen, mainly because half of the appliances were broken, so it made a refreshing change from the usual freezing outing to a local cafe. Celestia, she had forgotten how good homemade pancakes tasted. Once she had recovered from her flavor orgasm, she wiped her mouth and trotted across the room, having heard the water stop a few moments earlier. A few wisps of steam puffed out from beneath the door, swirling as they were, disturbed by Octavia on the other side. Vinyl knocked twice and pushed the door inwards. "Oh, occupied." Octavia was in the process of wrapping up her mane with a towel, and she couldn't see the trespasser. Vinyl smirked and stepped closer, knocking the door shut with her flank so the heat didn't escape. "Bonbon?" The cellist's lips pursed, confused at the lack of response. Without wasting another second, Vinyl leaned in and kissed her, holding it for a few moments just for fun. When they broke apart, Octavia was visibly trying not to smile. "That had better be you, Vinyl." "Nice to know you'll think of me when you kiss strange mares." Vinyl poked her filly friend's nose. Octavia finally wrestled the towel into place, revealing her big violet eyes twinkling with mischief. "I do seem to be attracted to the strange ones." She stepped closer and brushed her lips against Vinyl's for the briefest of seconds before turning and exiting the bathroom, leaving her DJ standing there with her lips puckered in anticipation. After a moment, Vinyl coughed awkwardly, feeling a little stupid, and then followed her lover. "It's a lovely apartment, isn't it?" Octavia called, standing at the large window overlooking the street below. "Yeah, I gotta admit, I'm kinda jealous," admitted Vinyl, joining the gray mare in her observation. "I still like our place better, though." Octavia bumped her hips against Vinyl's, giving her a warm smile. "Agreed." After a moment, Vinyl added, "I think we should head back there now. I've got a hankering for some sex serving." "Subtle as always, love." Octavia sighed tolerantly and removed the towel from her head, placing it on a nearby stack of laundry. "I suppose we should get going. Wouldn't want to overstay our welcome, would we?" Together, they pulled their winter clothes on, Vinyl didn't even remember taking hers off, and trotted downstairs. The store was quiet, the day had not yet begun. From the basement came the sounds of some pony hard at work. Lyra stood amongst the displays, using her magic to set a few of them in motion. When she noticed the couple, she nodded in greeting. "Heading out?" "Yes. We'd best get out of your hair before the customers arrive. This place is beautiful, by the way," said Octavia, still feasting her eyes on the colorful signs and decorations. "Thanks. You'd best not bother Bonbon. She needs to focus on making the products. I'll let her know you left." As they passed Lyra, Vinyl paused and stuck a hoof out. After a moment of hesitation, Lyra bumped it with her own. No more needed to be said, and they left the store quickly. Outside, the air was surprisingly warmer than expected, though snow still coated the ground. A few brave ponies wandered the streets, the unlucky souls that had errands to run this early. The couple set off in the direction of the campus, enjoying the insulation their boots gave them to the white powder covering everything. The rising sun reflected blindingly off the white rooftops, making the streets shine in a way that Vinyl had never seen before. "Should have brought my glasses," she muttered, squinting at the sharp glare of light. "I've always wondered what it would feel like to have my retinas melt. I suppose this is my lucky day," added Octavia, raising a hoof to shadow her eyes. "We'll be blind together. We can tie a rope around our necks and lead each other around." Vinyl giggled at the thought. "The blind leading the blind? Knowing my luck, we'll fall into a pit and never get out. At least the company'll be good." By the time they made it back to the campus, the sun had risen a quarter of the way into the sky, and the city had well and truly awoken. Thankfully, the angle at which they approached the university was in the same direction as the white reflection, giving them some sweet relief. They watched students exiting the campus clutch at their eyes and wince in pain. 2 stallions stood on either side of the entrance, their eyes welling up with tears as they stoically refused to cover them. As Vinyl led the way past them, she wondered if they could even focus on anything right now. From their bloodshot, stubborn eyes, it didn't seem likely. As they wandered into the main court, she couldn't help but marvel at them. Those security guards... Oh, wait. That's Vinyl speaking. Those security guards back there are pretty damn committed, huh? Committed is one way of describing it. Stupid is another. Honestly, why don't they just get some sunglasses? The grassy court wasn't looking very grassy these days. It, like everything outside, was covered in snow. As they were about to trudge across the student village, Octavia was struck by a thought. Oh, Vinyl. Yes? Replied the DJ, suddenly cautious. Could we stop by Psych's office before we go back to the dorm? Vinyl's shoulders slumped and she gave her best puppy impression. But, my hankering. There will still be time for that. Please, it's my birthday. As soon as the last words left her mouth, she knew she had won. Vinyl perked up and took her by the hoof, putting on her best Canterlot noble impression. But of course, my lady will get whatever she desires on such an auspicious occasion. Barely containing their giggles, the two mares trotted primly over to Psych's office building. Octavia felt a pang of sadness when Vinyl let her hoof go. She knew that her DJ was just making sure not to get too much attention inside, but it still didn't sit well that they had to continue being cautious after so many carefree months together. The receptionist was shooting them a smile as soon as they stepped inside. She seemed to completely forget about the stallion standing in front of her, asking for directions to a file room. Oh, Octavia! There you are! Head straight on up! She beamed, but her eyes didn't show it. Thank you? Octavia exchanged a glance with her filly friend before approaching the stairs. They'd discussed the strange behavior of the staff in this building before, but only in passing. She made a mental note to bring it up later so they could discuss it in more detail. Voices were echoing from Psych's office, but they weren't deterred. It wouldn't be the first time they'd interrupted a confidential. Well, technically it would be the second, but that wasn't the point. This time, it was an adult female voice accompanying the psychologist's. As they neared his closed door, their voices became clearer, and Octavia's heart threatened to explode. I know she came to see you, Psych. Don't even think of lying to me, said her mother, voice slick like oily water. Octavia's hooves were rooted into the floor. She leaned forward and bit Vinyl's tail as the white mare tried to pass, pulling the unicorn back to her side. Vinyl looked extremely confused until she saw the look on her filly friend's face. Are you sure? She whispered. Octavia just nodded. We need to get out of here, now. Octavia nodded again, numbly. Not now, please not now. Psych's voice piped up. The receptionist, right? Indeed. Simple, yet effective, replied that venomous tongue once more. That's always been your style. No mincing words, no wasting time so that your prey can get away. You always see through all attempts to stall you and your plans. Octavia realized with a start that Vinyl might have been visible for a moment when she took a few steps forward. The cracks around the door were wide enough to make out color, and Psych would recognize them anywhere. Was it possible that, for the split second that Vinyl might have been visible, the psychologist had realized who it was, and who was likely with her, and then decided to subtly warn them? Who could think that quickly? Wait! She blinked. I just did. Without a second thought, she let Vinyl pull her back down the hallway, both being careful not to make too much noise. Just before they reached the stairs, the office door opened and a sky-blue hoof stepped out. All the flattery in the world won't stop me, Psych! I will find out what you discussed with her, even if I have to get the file myself. Before she could take another step, the tutor quickly replied, You mean the file I have right here? The remark made the frightening mare pause, giving the runaway couple enough time to duck into the stairwell and find relative safety. As they stood for a moment, trying to compose themselves before escaping through the lobby, they heard the mother sigh in irritation. This is just a piece of paper with ha-ha written on it. Stop wasting my time! Psych's giggling reached them even as they trotted to the door. The receptionist watched them go, still smiling. The second they were back out in the cold, Octavia felt like she had been drenched in icy water, waking her up quickly. Vinyl was quickly leading her across the court towards their home, but she put a stop to that instantly. "We can't go back to the dorm yet. Didn't you hear? That receptionist is going to tell my mother we're back on the campus." Vinyl stopped and bit her lip, looking around cautiously. "What do we do then?" I need time to think this over. We need to go somewhere safe." Vinyl nodded resolutely. "Bonbon's place. She'll understand." Octavia's years of manners training screamed at her that going back there was extremely rude, but she shoved those thoughts away. This wasn't about manners, this was about friends. And if there's one thing she's learned about friends, it's that they always tried their best to help each other. If the feeling in her stomach was any indication, she was going to need all the help she could get. Psych looked out his office window, his brow wrinkled in worry. Vinyl and Octavia had shown up at the worst possible time. If he'd had an extra few minutes, he might have been able to distract that darn mare from her childish hunt, but as it was, she had left even more determined than ever. In the end, he'd let slip that the receptionist had access to the file room, which gave him a few minutes of reprieve. "Psych?" said a stallion, standing in his doorway. "Ah, Lush, there you are. Come in." Psych turned back from the window to face his guest. "I got that file for you. Octavia, right?" Lush placed the file on the desk. "Yes, that's right. Excellent work. Tell me, how did the receptionist react when you asked for it?" "She was very distracted. 2 students walked in behind me, and it's like she forgot I was there." "Oh, that's fortunate. You brought me a valuable few minutes, Lush. Thank you." The stallion reddened and scratched the back of his head. It was nothing, Psych. Any time, really." With an awkward chuckle, Lush slipped out of the office. "I wonder if his wife knows he's gay." Psych started to muse before quickly slapping himself. "Focus!" Please today," he mumbled, opening the file. At the top, Octavia's birth date shone like a beacon. Psych grinned, relief flooding his chest like hot chocolate staving off the cold. Right on cue, the dark blue-maned behemoth strode into his office once more, with lightning in her eyes. "No more jokes, Psych! She told me only you have the key to the students' files, and that some pony else had just gone in there. I see you had one of your fool friends retrieve the file right under my nose. Give it to me!" There wasn't a hint of request in her voice. "Well," Psych scratched his chin casually, knowing it would infuriate her. "I don't really think I can." "Excuse me?" Hot damn, this mare wasn't used to not getting what she wanted. "Because, as of midnight last night, Octavia is a legal adult. You can't access her private files," he said, keeping his tone conversational. There was no need for any provocative inflection. His words were all the emphasis he needed. "As her mother, I can ask Octavia for permission to view her files. Seems like that might be a bit difficult, considering that she's not here." The mare's lips were pursed. This wasn't going how she expected it would. "If a child is suspected of having some sort of mental problem, the parents are allowed to go over the file with the psychologist. Octavia clearly isn't in her right mind." Psych snorted. She seemed fine to me. You know, her psychologist. "You're clearly biased and unable to give a rational opinion." She was attacking from every angle, unwilling to retreat. "You've mistaken client confidentiality with bias. I'd love to help you out, but my hooves are tied on this one. Sorry, it's the law." Finally, the mare fell silent. She simply glared at him, those hateful eyes making him more than a little nervous. "You will regret this, Psych. I hope you don't like working here." With that, she turned and stormed out into the hallway, vanishing from sight. The danger finally over, Psych sunk into his armchair, letting out a long breath he didn't even realize he had been holding. A grin split his lips suddenly, and despite the fact he knew he was going to regret every word he just said, he could not help but giggle softly. and recline back. Oh my goodness! That was better than sex! Okay, chapter 21. Last chapter. Oh, I guess there's an epilogue too. I should probably read the epilogue as well. But this is the last chapter still. Anyway. Chapter 21. Octavia was fraught with worry. She paced nervously through Bonbon's living room, leaving a pattern in the carpet wherever she stepped. The shop owner had graciously allowed her and Vinyl to stay for as long as they needed, saying that the look on Octavia's face was all the convincing she needed. The worry in Bonbon's eyes had made her tear up a little. Seeing her mother again had brought back a lot of things she had tried very hard to bury, including a sense of isolation. Being reminded that she had loyal friends was exactly what she needed right now. Vinyl stood nearby, watching her with pained eyes. It was plain to see the DJ wasn't sure how to help her. In the minutes following their quick abandonment of campus, Vinyl had thrown out every possible solution she could think of, hoping at least one would stick. "We flee the city," she said firmly. "You know we can't. We change our units to external and do them remotely. Your computer is still in our room. We fake our deaths? That won't solve anything." As the hours passed, they found themselves curled up on one of the couches, despair and anxiety painting pictures in their minds. Vinyl saw Octavia being dragged away by her mother to some far-off estate, plunged into loneliness and isolation once more. Imagining her sweet, creative, witty lover being locked away again was enough to make Vinyl shake with impotent rage. What kind of monster would treat her own daughter like that? Octavia saw a cold, impersonal psychologist telling her she didn't love Vinyl and explaining why in perfectly enunciated monotone as her mother nodded in approval. She saw Vinyl alone in an alley behind a bar, calling her number and getting no response as the night grew older and the snowfall heavier. She saw her friends wondering where she had gone and missing her for the first month or two, then slowly forgetting that she was ever there. She couldn't even muster the strength to cry at such an awful fantasy. But most of all, she saw the rest of her life, past and present, stretching away from her in both directions. Her past was controlled and monitored like she was an experiment in creating the perfect daughter. Well-mannered, easily manipulated, completely dependent, smart, but not smart enough to think for herself. Was this what her mother had been trying to do? Did she even love her? Or have any kind feeling towards her at all? Why was I even born if I'm not allowed to live? Strangely, that thought struck something within her, like the first sparks in a fire. Why wasn't she allowed to live? It certainly wasn't for her safety. She'd tried it. She'd been living for the past 6 months without getting hurt. She'd tasted life, love, and friendship without any horrible repercussions, but the part of life that tasted the sweetest was independence. She'd experienced those things of her own accord and in her own way. The flames inside her strengthened, glowing in tandem with her realizations. Now that she'd tasted life, she couldn't go back. Her life before university was like drowning, and every month she'd spent with Vinyl had been a gulp of air into her lungs, letting her think clearly. Her fire raged now, completely out of control and loving it. Octavia knew what she had to do now. It was the only way. "Vinyl," she said loudly, "I'm going to talk to my mother. Alone." Her love, so sweet and supportive and kind, looked at her with wide eyes. "What? That's the worst idea yet!" A third, worried voice came from the door leading downstairs. "What idea?" Octavia motioned for Vinyl to not reply, but it was too late. "Octavia wants to go see her mother! After all the trouble we've been through, to hide from her?" Bonbon bit her lip anxiously. "I really don't think that's a good idea." "You see?" Vinyl flailed her hoof at the cream mare to illustrate her point. "I think she should do it," Lyra said quietly, stepping into the room. They both smelled of sugar and candy. Octavia nodded her head to show her thanks. "Her mother is the source of literally all of your problems. The sooner you deal with her, the sooner you two can go back to normal." "She'll drag you away from here," Vinyl said desperately. Octavia shook her head. Only if I let her. And I really don't plan on doing that. I'll come with you then. I'll fight her. Now that won't solve anything. Octavia reached out and touched Vinyl's cheek softly. I love you, but I must speak with her alone. You've helped me so much, in more ways than you can imagine. Without you, I could never do this, so please, just trust me. Her words were so heartfelt that Vinyl felt her eyes burn. I love you too, Philly. This is still a terrible idea, but I love you anyway, she said hoarsely. Lyra cleared her throat. I might know something that could help you understand, Vinyl. Her ears perking up, Bonbon opened her mouth as if to object, but closed it at a glance from Lyra. A few months ago, when I started uni, I was a complete jerk. You probably know that better than anyone, except maybe Bon. But that doesn't matter. I was mean to the people around me for no reason other than to entertain my awful sense of humor. In short, I was bad. I slowly drove away any pony who tried to be my friend, and worst of all, I didn't even know why I did it. Fortunately for me, Bonbon never learned to stay away from bad ponies. Bonbon scoffed, but smiled as Lyra continued. She helped me become strong enough to accept that I was horrible, and then she helped me change. I don't know whether it's obvious on the outside, but I'm not the same pony I was back at the start of the year. And I'm guessing Octavia isn't either. Vinyl was looking at her lover, seeing the truth in her former enemy's words. Yeah, she is, but she isn't. Exactly, Lyra nodded. I don't know the full story between you two, and honestly, it seems like you both just pop up randomly in our lives. But I'd wager you helped her become who she is now. What you've got to do now is trust that she's strong enough to handle this, just like Bond trusts me not to relapse into assholery again. I do trust her, began Vinyl before quickly turning to Octavia. I do trust you. I know you can talk your mother down. What I don't trust is myself. She stepped closer. You may have noticed I'm a little bit protective of you. Really? Octavia whispered through a smirk. Yeah. I also may have had several fantasies where I beat the crap out of your mother. Ah, so you want to be the one to meet her? Well, no, I'd rather never ever meet her at all. Damn it, I don't even know what I want. She stamped a hoof in frustration. I just don't want you to get hurt. I know that contradicts what I said about knowing you can beat her, but... Octavia shut her up with a quick kiss. I know what you mean, but I have to do this. Just tell me one thing, Vinyl said quietly, somewhat subdued by the comforting peck. Why is she such a bitch? The others looked at her expectantly, and she sighed. I suppose I should share what I know. She began to pace around the living room, attempting to jog her memory. I've managed to glean a few things from gossiping maids and the other working folk. Hey, she said, as Lyra and Bonbon exchanged looks. It's not like it was my choice to hire them. We didn't say anything, muttered Lyra, as Bonbon simultaneously said, We understand. Anyway, I was just a filly at the time, but I remember overhearing a conversation between two ladies. Okay, I think this is starting like it's in italics, so I think this is like a flashback sequence. Octavia snuck down the hall, the soft carpet muffling her steps. She hated having lessons this early in the morning. She wanted to go outside and watch the Pegasus groundkeepers keep the clouds away. It simply wasn't fair. She reached an open doorway and peeked inside. If a maid caught her hiding from the tutor, she'd tell her mother immediately. None of them could be trusted. This she knew from experience. There were a couple of stallions in a small tea room chatting idly. She recognized them as the new replacement aides. The last couple had been sent away for giving bad advice or something. Octavia kept herself still as she listened in. Strangest job offer I've ever had, to be sure, truckled one of them. But when she comes knocking, you don't refuse. Tell me about it, replied the second, sounding much less relaxed than his colleague. I researched her work before accepting the job, you know. She's cold as ice. Apparently, she used to be as starry-eyed as that filly of hers. Wanted to be an actress or an artist. I don't know, something fancy. But something happened. And suddenly, she's in business, making powerful friends and carving through competitors with insane determination. Damn. What happened? Beats me. Whatever it was, it messed her up bad. He took a shaky sip from his cup. Now we're out of italics. Flashback sequence over. Vinyl whistled. Whew. Sounds like someone's got issues. Lara and Bonbon politely kept their mouths closed. Octavia gave a tired smile. None of this is new, though. I don't think it will help us. Well, maybe it will, Vinyl said, scratching her chin thoughtfully. She's used to being in control, right? I mean, from what I've seen of her, that's pretty much her entire personality. And she didn't tell you about her past herself, did she? Octavia shook her head. Then she wouldn't expect you to know any painful little details. Maybe you could remind her of a time when she wasn't in control. It might put her on the defensive. Octavia opened her mouth to object, but then closed it again a moment later. That's a really good idea, love. She seemed a little surprised, making Vinyl turn red. I got the idea from some advice Psyche gave me ages ago. Back when we were arguing, he told me you were a little sensitive about your mane, and if I wanted to get to you, I should try targeting it. And instead, you texted me a compliment. I wondered where that came from. Octavia felt a rush of affection for Vinyl that made her chest ache. She cleared her throat. Well, it seems I won't be facing her unarmed after all. The couple shared a tight smile. Bonbon licked her lips nervously. Not to be a wet blanket, but there's still the matter of your mother paying for your tuition, food and board, that sort of thing. Oh, she'll cut me off. I don't think there's any way we can avoid it. There's no way I can keep living on campus. Lyra and Bonbon exchanged a series of urgent gestures until Bonbon finally sighed. I'd offer you a place here, but we only have 2 bedrooms. It was clear their host felt a little awkward about it. I know, don't worry. I will not be a burden. I'll find a way. We need to find another source of bits, mumbled Vinyl. It was her turn to pace. After a minute of silence, Octavia's ears perked up. There is one thing I could do, she said slowly. Vinyl stopped mid-stride and met her eyes hopefully. I can defer for 6 months. Defer? Take a semester off and resume my studies next year. How would that help? You'd still be homeless. Bonbon seemed to understand. Oh! You can get a full-time job and save up enough over 6 months to pay for everything. Half a year's pay should cover it, Lyra said, adding her approval with a nod. Yeah, great. And in the meantime, you'll just live on the street? And what happens when you go back to uni and no longer work full-time? How'll you pay for everything then? I'll have to get an apartment, somewhere small, just for the next few months. But then I have to pay for food as well, and bills. Octavia felt her confidence in the plan slipping away, and Vinyl could see it. I can help, she said quickly, thinking as she spoke. It's been ages since I've done a gig. Reckon it's time I got back into the game. I wasn't raking it in, mind you, but it should be enough for food and bills for one pony. As an afterthought, she added, I was actually getting kind of popular before I stopped. If I can get even higher than that, I might be able to pay the rent as well. You'd do that? Just give away all your earnings? Octavia was shocked. Emotional support was one thing, but casually giving her every bit she made was a completely different matter. Vinyl looked confused. Well, yeah. Why wouldn't I? She was almost knocked to the ground from the fierce hug that Octavia gave her. You're so lovely when you're oblivious, she whispered, planting a big kiss on Vinyl's cheek. That's big of you, Vinyl, Lyra said quietly. I respect that. Lyra's character, I mean, she just had like that explanation about like how she changed as a person, but she like literally went from like, haha, what's up, queer, to wow, good, I respect that. Bon Bon beamed at the couple and hugged Lyra. Oh, this is just so sweet. While their friends were talking, Vinyl couldn't help but whisper worriedly into Octavia's ear. It's gonna suck not living together. I know. It'll only be for 6 months, but we'll both be busy with work. It's going to be hard, love. Octavia felt a great weight on her heart, yet it did little to extinguish the fire of her resolve. It isn't perfect, but it's our lives now. We'll make it. We got this. Vinyl tightened her grip to show her agreement. As the embrace ended, Octavia gave a breathless chuckle. I suppose I'll need to learn how to write a resume. Bon Bon shook her head, already smiling. I don't think you'll need one. How would you like to work in a small but quickly growing confectionery shop? We only have a small number of staff and could use some pony with a head for planning. Lyra grinned. It looked out of place on her face, but it was a thankful sight. Why didn't I think of that? She turned to Bon Bon. You know that catering service I was talking about the other day? The one we agreed was impossible because we didn't have enough employees? You are the perfect business partner, you know that, right? Lyra was as close to hopping with joy as she was capable of being. Bon Bon simply enjoyed the praise. Octavia felt her spirits lift. Working full-time with her friends wouldn't be that bad at all. Their joy was a little contagious, and as she glanced at Vinyl, she saw she wasn't the only one infected. Vinyl was deep in thought, but a smile was growing on her lips. Hey, she said, pausing for a few seconds as though finalizing the details in her mind. You guys are going to be running a catering service? Why not? Said Bon Bon brightly. Ponies love our treats, and we've already had a few requests. The only thing stopping us was finding a suitable sun pony to help us run it. You know, all my gigs so far have used house food, just the standard crap you get from vendors. You think we could maybe, sorta team up? Come for the music, stay for the food? Octavia almost squealed. A joint business venture! If I mediate it, I'll get to see Vinyl a lot and still work full-time. I think we hired the right pony, Lyra whispered. Bon Bon nodded. I believe we have a deal. Everything was in place. Octavia's future was no longer at risk, and the tension in the room had faded quickly over the last few minutes. She was filled with a great love for her friends that overpowered the few fears she had left. Her mother no longer had any claim to her life, and it was time to inform her of that fact. We can discuss the details later, but for now, may I borrow some pony's phone? Vinyl's grin faded as she took her mobile out of her mane and passed it over. You making the call? Yes, I think I'll ask her to meet me in Blue's Tavern. Neutral ground. She dialed the number, with some difficulty thanks to the phone being designed for unicorns, and took a deep breath. The others gathered closer, leaning in to listen. Vinyl pressed her ear against the other side of the phone, looking worried. It was an expression that had absolutely no place on such a carefree pony, Octavia thought, and after today she would do her utmost to make sure it never appeared again. The phone rang twice, and answered. Lapis Lazuli, speak, came the flat greeting. Hello, Mother, Octavia replied steadily. Vinyl mouthed Lapis with a questioning look. Octavia shook her head and mouthed later. Octavia! Where are you? Her tone was perfectly neutral. It was impossible to make out any emotion in it. I'll meet you at Blue's Tavern, in the city. Goodbye. No, you will. Octavia ended the call. Her hoof wasn't shaking in the slightest when she gave the phone back to Vinyl, who looked at her with admiration. You have no idea how sexy you are when you're determined, Vinyl said breathlessly. Lyra and Bon Bon, sensing the shift in mood, quietly excused themselves and went downstairs. Did I speak clearly enough? Maybe she misunderstood me. Octavia slipped her hooves around Vinyl's neck. She understood you, babe. She's probably shaking in her dragon skin boots. They embraced for a few minutes, squeezing as much out as they could. Octavia took her hooves away, but Vinyl stayed close. I should get there before her, Vinyl. The unicorn pressed her face into Octavia's neck. Are you sure we don't have time? She whispered. Smirking, Octavia pulled her lover away. For you, maybe. Ouch! Vinyl smiled too and walked her over to the stairs. They hesitated for a moment, then kissed passionately. Everything they could say had already been said. Octavia slipped into the booth without a word. The tavern was fairly quiet at this time of day, just the regulars and herself. She'd ordered some wine before sitting down, though she wasn't sure if it was for her or for her mother. The stallion at the bar hadn't even asked for identification. She breathed deeply and tried to center herself, but to no avail. The fire inside her flickered with uncertainty. It had been a long time since she'd seen her mother, and there was no telling how Octavia would react. She might freeze up, or stutter uncontrollably, or any other number of confidence-destroying things. All she could do was remember who she was doing this for, and hope that it would give her strength. The door to the tavern swung open, and her mother walked in. Dark blue mane as sharp as her eyes. She wore a silver necklace with a blue gem embedded in it. Octavia forced herself to keep breathing when those judging eyes met hers. She struggled to keep her face neutral, her heart beating faster by the second. Lapis strode over to her, cocked her head in appraisal, then sat down. Octavia couldn't help but let a little surprise slip into her expression. She's expected Lapis to refuse to sit and demand for Octavia to follow her immediately. From the slight smirk on her mother's face, she had anticipated that and decided to do something that would put Octavia off balance, so she would be on the defensive. Stop. No more games, Mother. We need to talk as family, Octavia said softly. Lapis's expression didn't change. You've grown, she replied, and Octavia knew she didn't mean in size. Yes, I have. Mother, I've heard stories. Lapis cut her off smoothly. Rumors, mostly. They say you've taken some club harlot as your partner. I would dearly hope for there to be no truth behind them. The urge to snap and scream rose sharply, but Octavia fought to keep it at bay. It would only show her mother that she hadn't matured at all. Instead, she smiled warmly. It's a good thing you're sitting down, then, because... Lapis cut her off again. You also haven't returned to your room for a while. One would dread to consider what sort of things you've been up to. Octavia maintained a pleasant tone. Disgusting things, no doubt. Almost as bad as spying on one's daughter. Finally, a reaction. Her mother's left eyebrow twitched ever so slightly. She mustn't have expected Octavia to fight back at all. Internally, she whooped for joy. I hardly think worrying about my only daughter, whom I've spent so much time and money on, is the same as wallowing in whatever cesspools your undoubtedly promiscuous playmate frequents. She is not, and really, if you'd hoped to change my opinion of her, you could have requested to meet me somewhere with a little more charm. This place doesn't exactly paint a kind picture of your standards these days. Octavia remained silent. She had to change something. If they kept going like this, she'd never get to voice her side of the story, and nothing would be resolved. So, she waited as calmly as she could after hearing the love of her life insulted twice in a row, and when her mother finished, she replied, Are you done? And then she giggled. It was only a brief laugh, but the reaction in her mother's eyes was invaluable. Octavia kept smiling as she continued. Honestly, Mother, interrupting me constantly is very immature. You're embarrassing me. Indeed, Lapis bristled. Then you might understand my displeasure with your decisions. Being embarrassed by your family is profoundly annoying, is it not? What exactly went through your head when you decided to tarnish our reputation? Love, mostly. You can imagine how it might have caught me off guard, having never received it before. Octavia felt electricity crackle between them. There was no turning back now. Love? Lapis spat. She wasn't playing anymore. I've spent the best years of my life raising you with every advantage, giving you every opportunity to succeed. You were supposed to be perfect, able to carry on my legacy. Octavia was quiet for a moment. That's what you think love is? She asked softly. She felt whatever tenuous connection she still had with her mother snap suddenly, like a broken cello string. I was just a project to you, a successor to be trained, not a daughter to be loved. Daughter, successor, splitting hairs is the lowest form of response, Octavia. Do you see what has happened in your time away from me? You're already forgetting basic discipline and manners. The sooner I take you away from this nonsense, the better. We're leaving tomorrow. Shaking her head sadly, Octavia felt whatever fear she had for her mother slip away. You're delusional. I'm staying here, Mother. And how will you be paying for your tuition and lodging? With the full-time job I was hired for half an hour ago. That clearly wasn't the answer she was expecting. And you believe you can manage to study as well as work full-time? She smiled, but it held the hint of worry. No, that would be unfeasible. I'm deferring for a semester to save money, and then I'll switch to part-time when I go back. You believe you've been thorough, do you? Lapis said through gritted teeth. Seeing her words have such an effect wasn't as satisfying as Octavia thought it would be. She felt nothing but sadness for her mother, for whatever had happened in her past that drove her to become so obsessed with raising the perfect successor. But it was far, far too late for her. If she hadn't grown to love Octavia over 18 years, she never would. It was harsh, but Octavia refused to fool herself. Where will you stay while saving money, Lapis continued. My Philly friend will be assisting me in paying for everything. An apartment, using the money made from a business partnership with some other friends of ours that I will be mediating, she replied simply. Lapis Lazuli, scourge of the business world, owner of an iron heart, and undoubtedly the worst mother in existence, looked absolutely lost. Octavia wondered if she had ever experienced defeat before. Such was her expression of disbelief. What happened to you, Lapis? Octavia asked gently. It was time to prove that she was mature enough to stand on her own, not by taunting her defeated adversary, but by showing sympathy. I've heard about your past. I know you weren't always this controlling and manipulative. What changed? She leaned across the table, meaning to hold one of her mother's hooves, but the older mare jerked them away, still looking as though there had been some mistake that she hadn't actually lost. Finally, whether it was the last dregs of compassion or something entirely unrelated, Lapis opened up. Perhaps it was the very fact that she had spent so much time grooming Octavia that made her so adept at getting into her mother's head, but her resistance and carefully crafted abrasive personality was fading by the second. I wasn't good enough, she said. For who? For Trottingham Music School. I used to play the cello like you. It wasn't my talent, but I still loved it. I was obsessed with getting into that school. Even after I met your father, it was still my biggest focus. But I was self-taught, and there was no way I could compete against the other applicants. They practically laughed me out of the audition room. Startled at getting some insight into her mother's past, Octavia pressed for more. There are other music schools, brilliant ones. You don't understand. It had to be Trottingham. It was the best of my time. I had idealized every aspect of it in preparation for my imagined acceptance and ascension to my proper place. When they turned me away, I was shattered. And that's what made you... It was the start. I was angry, both at myself and the school. Over time, my anger turned to bitterness and grew into an unrelenting desire to take back what should have been mine. None of the other applicants deserved to get in, you see. They had the talent, but not the passion. Not like me. I deserved it more. Lapis's tone was almost desperate, as though begging for Octavia to see her point of view. She wanted her approval. It was slightly dizzying. "What happened after?" Octavia asked, though she already had a few ideas. "Your father left me before he knew I was pregnant. He said he would come back if I ever moved on from my failure. It's been a long time." She paused, staring at the table. "I resolved to raise you alone, and make sure you never encountered the same problems I did." "You just wanted to live through me? That's the reason for all the discipline and isolation? What was with that legacy nonsense, then?" Lapis cracked a weary smile. "Heir to my legacy sounds a tad more respectable than vessel for reliving my past, don't you think?" "You're unbelievable! Do you even hear what you're saying?" Octavia couldn't help letting her calm appearance slip away. "I knew you were a terrible mother, but this is just monstrous." "Your choice of adjective matters very little. You've gotten me to speak of things I haven't talked about in decades. Like it or not, you're following in my footsteps." It was surprising how much that thought disgusted Octavia. "This is a confession from the guilty, Lapis, not an interrogation." "Guilty? Guilty of giving you the best education available? Guilty of letting you develop your musical skills and hone them to perfection? Oh, I'm sure it was awful for you." Lapis chuckled darkly. "You're just like those other applicants, you know, tearing everything away just before I achieve my dream. Guilty of keeping me isolated from other ponies my age. Guilty of stripping away whatever privacy I had left through psychologists. Guilty of possessing a self-victimization complex so huge it dwarfs even the self-esteem issues you gave me. You're rotten to the core. Well and truly, I'm ashamed to be your daughter." Lapis stood abruptly, bumping the table. "Shame? What could you possibly know about shame? Running away with some harlot? She's 1,000 times purer than you. She's in university on a music scholarship, much like the one you weren't accepted for. She failed every class except music in high school and dropped out a year early. Do you want to know why she succeeded where you failed? Because she kept trying. She didn't give up. She didn't go home, and she most certainly didn't have a child and spend 18 years brooding over her failure so she could live through someone else's achievement." Octavia was panting a little bit by the end, but she still kept her tone even and resisted the urge to shout. They stared at each other for a long, tense moment, both finally having said everything that they wanted to say. Octavia no longer felt any pity for her mother. If she was so determined to be an awful pony that she gave up most of her life for it, then nothing Octavia said now would change her. Lapis turned to leave. "You have everything you want. Remember who gave it to you," she said pertly. "I will," replied Octavia. "Her name is Vinyl Scratch." Her mother stiffened, and then kept walking. In the silence that followed the tavern door slamming shut, Octavia realized a few of the other patrons were looking at her. One by one, and then everybody clapped. One by one, they raised their mugs. The bartender nervously approached with a glass of wine she'd ordered and placed it in front of her. "I would have brought it to you sooner, madam, but you seem to be, busy." Octavia took the glass and raised it to the onlookers and the bartender before taking a small sip. "This is the finest wine I've ever tasted," she told him honestly. Vinyl was close to pacing a trench in the living room. 1,000 anxious thoughts rushed through her head, each vying for attention. Lyra and Bonbon had tried distracting her with mindless chatter for a little while, but they had to get back to work. She'd been chewing her lip so hard that it bled a little. At first she compared it with being nervous before exams, but then the exams didn't try and take away the one pony she loved more than any other. She said she wanted to handle this on her own, but what if that was just code for hide in the rafters with the fire extinguisher and sweep in at the last moment? It was absurd, and it was exactly the sort of thing Octavia would expect her to do. Was she letting her down by doing what she was told? Vinyl groaned and headed towards the stairs, but stopped herself before reaching them. She'd attempted to leave a few times now, but every time she almost succeeded, she remembered Octavia's soft request. "Please, Just trust me. You're killing me, babe, Vinyl whispered hoarsely. She cast her mind back to happier times, when they were both stumbling through the first stages of their relationship, when there was no threat to their happiness, when all they did every day was cuddle and talk about everything they could think of. But every memory only reinforced the awareness that Octavia wasn't with her right now. The door to the stairs opened, and Vinyl nearly tripped over in her haste to turn around. Lyra winced at the sight. Sorry to get your hopes up. How you doing? How do you think? Vinyl growled, untangling her limbs and standing up straight again. Worrying about her won't change anything. So why worry? Lyra slipped into the open kitchen and got a glass of water. You don't seem to understand this love thing very well. Chuckling, Lyra returned to the living room. I understand it well enough. It's only worth worrying about something if the outcome is uncertain. Vinyl slumped on the couch. Got the inside scoop, do ya? Come on, Vinyl. You saw the change in Octavia's demeanor. She could glance at an avalanche and send it tumbling sheepishly back up the mountain. Yeah, she can get pretty badass when she wants to. So let her be badass. I think you've hogged all the cool in your relationship for long enough. The smile was obvious in Lyra's voice, even though Vinyl was too busy counting the threads on a pillow to see it. She was always cooler than me. I mean, look at us. I'm the one freaking out at home while she's out fighting. How pathetic is that? Well, if it makes you feel better, said an amused but slightly shell-shocked voice, we can both freak out at home now. Vinyl's head snapped up, her pupils widening to take in as much of Octavia as they could. The gray mare didn't have a single hair out of place, but she looked exhausted nonetheless. The DJ shot off the couch and tackled her in a split second. They floundered onto the soft carpet without any semblance of grace or coolness. Lyra laughed all the way downstairs. Octavia looked up at her lover with a weary smile. This feels familiar. Without another word, Vinyl kissed her, pouring all of her worry and fear into one huge display of love. They didn't part for several minutes, using the time to feed their pent-up stress into the roaring flames of their love. When the kiss ended, all Vinyl could ask for was the simplest question of all. Are we safe? Yes, replied Octavia, squeezing Vinyl harder. Finally. Well, that's fine enough of an ending, but we do have an epilogue. The epilogue's not that long, so, might as well read that as well. I don't know. I don't know what the author's intentions are, but usually epilogues and such are like, well, you can take them as canon or not if you want to. I need to take a swig of water, dude. I've been talking for 59 minutes. But, here we go. Epilogue. This is 6 months after those events. So, assumedly after she deferred. I really thought... Okay, hang on. Let's read. The West Manhattan University grounds were joyous, to say the least. Now that the snow had melted, there were a lot more students out enjoying the scenery. The final exams for the previous semester had finally finished, and many were out celebrating their freedom. From the first years to the post-grads, all were grateful for the temporary ceasefire in their academic lives. It was the beginning of a new year, and all the second years were confidently striding about, chuckling at maps, occasionally deigning to help out some first years with directions. All the second years, that is, except for two. The first was a gray mare with a dark, bedraggled mane. She had bags under her eyes, but her smile made it clear she was anything but harrowed. Around her neck was a pink bow tie, and around her hoof was a VIP band with bright blue and white stripes. To any casual observers, she would appear to be your average post-concert student, albeit one with more elegance in each step than most have in their entire bodies. That's not to say she was stuck up. On the contrary, she was warm and friendly to those who casually greeted her. She joked with a few of the students, and even bumped her hoof against any who wore the same concert band. A year ago, most would be too scared to even approach her. Her name was Octavia, and she was a cellist studying advanced musical theory, classical, business management, and, strangely enough, extended psychology. So this is like the first chapter. It's like a mirror of the first chapter, but like, a year later. This is kind of neat. The second was a white unicorn with a flat, carefully brushed neon blue mane. On her head sat a pair of dark purple shades, leaving her striking scarlet eyes completely visible. She fidgeted as she walked, and every few seconds her hoof shot up to ruffle her hair, but was restrained by self-control. Despite this, she still managed to give an air of renown around her. Some students whispered to each other when they saw her, while others straight up started cheering. That's not to say she was undeserving. On the contrary, she was responsible for the majority of post-exam parties and had won the hearts of the students through hard work and experimental music. She was happy to give high ones to any who came to thank her for distracting them from the horrors of university. Even the teachers liked her for helping their students relieve stress before coming to class in the last few months. A year ago, most considered her presence at university a fluke. Her name was Vinyl Scratch, and she was a DJ studying secondary advanced musical theory, modern, advanced visual arts, and, strangely enough, extended psychology. The two of them embraced each other on the grassy court in the center of the university. When they parted, Octavia couldn't help but laugh at her lover's mane. Vinyl flushed. I thought you'd like it. I mean, this is your triumphant return after all. It's a big moment. Oh, Vinyl, you should know by now I rather like the madness that is your hair. Octavia chided gently, bopping Vinyl on the nose. Now you tell me, she grumbled, taking a moment to violently mess it up until it returned to its natural style. So, did you like the party last night? It was amazing. I feel like I just left. Eyeing Octavia's less than pristine mane, Vinyl smirked. You look like it too. Oh, shush. I only slept a few hours, and I was too excited to sit still and brush it like usual. By the way, Octavia raised an eyebrow deviously. Did you work another of my compositions into that final song? Vinyl whistled innocently. I knew it! How do you keep doing that? The crowd loved it! Octavia danced on the tips of her hooves for a moment, caught up in her own excitement. I think it's because I'm working with something you've created. Like, I'm not just listening to a song, I'm listening to you and everything you're trying to say through the song, and I can translate it in my own way. Vinyl reddened considerably as she continued. You gotta stop me before I try talking romantically. I sound like a total dweeb. Octavia kissed her quickly. A very sweet dweeb. They walked together through the soft grass. It's been a crazy year, huh? Indeed. I can't believe how different things are now. Octavia shook her head, smiling at the memories. The last few months had seen her and her friends grow closer than ever, and she felt more loved now than at any time in the past 19 years. They're going to be even more different here soon. We're going to be living together again. I'm getting some insane gig requests. Yeah, requests! They actually request me! How cool is that? And Lyra and Bonbon are talking about setting up other stores in other cities? Oh, I know. Imagine, stores in Canterlot, Trottingham, Ponyville? I don't think I'll be short of work anytime soon. Yeah, Vinyl said slowly. Octavia stopped walking and frowned at her. What's wrong? Nothing. Not yet. I think working with Bon and Lyra is great while we study, and I love them, don't get me wrong. But one day I was kind of hoping we could do our own thing, you know? Begin our euphonious revolution we used to talk about. We will, Octavia said, touching Vinyl's cheek. But let's just focus on surviving university first, okay? Deal. After a moment, Vinyl lowered her voice. Anything new from you-know-who? Just a text this morning. Here. Octavia slipped her phone out of her mane and handed it to Vinyl. A message from Mother was on the screen. I hear you have re-enrolled. Should you reconsider your decisions in life, you have my number. Well, that's gotta mean she feels something for you, right? Vinyl said, but Octavia didn't look hopeful. She probably just sees me as an asset that has been misplaced. Or maybe she's just too proud to admit that she misses you. Octavia gave a thankful smile. It's okay, Vinyl. I'm not sad about it. She did give me every opportunity I could have hoped for. Even though it wasn't her intention, this is the reason we met. But that doesn't change how I feel about her. Maybe in a few years, if she manages to finally move on from her past, we might be able to start again. Until then, however... All right. It just bothers me that you're not that close with your parents, whereas mine were pretty cool up until they kicked me out. Yes, about your parents. Octavia's eyes twinkled. What? I think it's time I met them. Don't you? And that's the end of University Days. Or Vinyl and Octavia use University Days. So, it's been a long time since I last read a story. I went through and reread all of this before I recorded these new chapters. And, respect to Dawnfade. I don't know if Dawnfade's a guy or a girl. I'm assuming a girl. There's a girl pony in their profile picture, so probably it's a girl in real life, right? That's how that works. Probably, or their best strength is writing, honestly, the descriptions of, the scenery and how characters are feeling and, I don't know. They're very good at setting a scene. A lot of the, dialogue and stuff is a little bit too cheesy and, overtly sweet for my taste. There were several moments where I was reading and I was like, oh my god, really? But, that's just my taste. Some people probably really like it. And I'm not sure. I know this was big back in the day. I don't know if it was as big as Allegreza. And I only say that because Allegreza is, right here in the related on Film Fiction. But that's another one. I mean, obviously... Vinyl Scratch and Octavia are tons of people ship them together, right? So makes sense. But yeah, I mean, it's a fine little fan fiction. It's good. It's good. You know what? It was good. It's better than fine. It was good. And it's nice to go back and read these things and get sort of a time capsule of the culture and stuff at the time, because I haven't been a part of that for such a long time. Occasionally I'll find myself just looking at pony communities just to see what's up, right? And I mean, they're still holding on, but Hasbro has definitely moved on, and I think it's for the better that Hasbro has too, because I think the quality of Friendship is Magic was really dipping there at the end. Anyway, I'm kind of just talking to myself and ranting. I am interested in maybe doing more readings, but, My Little Pony stuff is My Little Pony stuff. And then on the other side, it's where else can you really find, internet stories that aren't creepypasta or, no sleep stories, There's already tons of channels that do that, and, I mean, I like reading horror as much as the next guy, but, something like this is romance or just adventure or drama, suspense. There's not really as big of a market for that. I just don't know. I mean, I can go and find short stories online, I guess. Then my other worry is that if I were to read a novel, well, one, classic A's Cop problem, I wouldn't finish it most likely, right? But then two is all these audiobook places, they're going to come at my ass for copyright if I just want to read a story online. The internet is just so different now. I can't just do that. So, I don't know. If you listened to all of this all the way to the end, thanks. Thanks for coming by, and glad I can put some stuff out for people who still think about me every now and then. Sometimes I'll get comments and stuff, and people will say that they met their friends because of me, or these key moments in their lives are highlighted by the videos I used to upload, and that stuff is what really makes me want to keep going. I love hearing how I've connected with people and changed them. For better or worse, I suppose. Anyway, I should probably stop talking now. We're at 1 hour and 10 minutes. Thanks again. I might upload something else. I'm not sure. You can stop by the Discord if you want to chat. It's there. Yeah, that's it.